The rain pounded against the pavement as James Mitchell stood frozen in the doorway of his Mercedes, his $3,000 suit getting soaked. But he didn't care about that. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Because 20 feet away, a little girl no older than 6 was digging through a dumpster behind his office building, her tiny hands pulling out crushed soda cans and stuffing them into a torn plastic bag. She had his eyes. Those same green eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. The same dimple in her left cheek when she concentrated. The same way her nose crinkled when she reached for something just out of reach. "Mommy will be so happy," the little girl whispered to herself, clutching a handful of bottles. "Maybe we can buy soup tonight." James felt his chest tighten. His hands started shaking, because 7 years ago, he'd made a choice. He'd signed papers. He'd walked away from someone he loved because his mother said she wasn't good enough, because his board members said a relationship with a nobody would ruin his image, because he was a coward. And now this little girl, this beautiful child picking through garbage to help her mother, might be... No, it couldn't be. But those eyes. God, those eyes. The little girl suddenly looked up, rain streaming down her face, and their eyes met. For one heartbeat, everything else disappeared. The city noise faded. The rain stopped mattering. And in that moment, James Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Industries, worth over $2 billion, felt his entire world crack apart. Then someone called out, "Emily! Emily, where are you?" The girl's face lit up with pure joy. "Coming up, Mommy!" She grabbed her bag of cans and ran toward a voice in the shadows, disappearing around the corner before James could move, before he could breathe, before he could do anything but stand there with rain mixing with something else on his cheeks. But he'd heard the name, Emily. And 7 years ago, when he'd walked away, when he'd broken Rachel's heart and left her standing in his apartment with tears streaming down her face, she'd whispered something. Something he'd tried to forget. "If I ever have a daughter, I'll name her Emily, after my grandmother, the only person who ever really loved me." James stumbled backward, his legs hitting the car door. His driver rushed out with an umbrella, but James waved him away. He needed the rain, needed something to shock his system back to reality. Because if that little girl was his daughter, if Rachel had been pregnant when he left, if he'd spent 7 years building an empire while his child picked through trash. "Sir, are you all right?" his driver asked, concern flooding his voice. No, he wasn't all right. He would never be all right again. But before James could answer, before he could think, before he could process what he'd just seen, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out with trembling hands. It was a message from his mother. "Dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Don't be late. I have someone I want you to meet. It's time you got married, James. To someone appropriate this time." He stared at the message, then looked back at the corner where the little girl had disappeared. Appropriate. 7 years ago, he'd chosen appropriate over love. He'd chosen his mother's approval over his heart. He'd chosen money and status over a woman who'd made him laugh, who'd seen past his walls, who'd loved him when he had nothing but dreams. And now... "Sir," his driver pressed, "should we go?" James swallowed hard. His entire life he'd built everything on control. Control over his emotions, his company, his image. He'd spent 7 years becoming the man everyone expected him to be. But that little girl with his eyes had just shattered that control in 30 seconds. "I need you to do something for me," James said quietly, his voice raw. "And you can't tell anyone. Not my mother, not my assistant, nobody." The driver, Robert, had been with him for 10 years. Through the breakup with Rachel, through the building of his empire, through everything. "Of course, sir. What do you need?" "That little girl who just ran past us. I need you to find out where she lives, who her mother is, everything." James paused, his throat tight. "But be discreet. Don't let them know anyone's asking." Robert's eyes widened, but he nodded. I'll handle it personally. James climbed back into the car, his hands still shaking. He stared out the window as Robert pulled into traffic, heading toward Mitchell Tower. But James wasn't seeing the city anymore. He was seeing Rachel's face 7 years ago, the way she'd touched her stomach as she'd watched him pack his things, the strange sadness in her eyes that he'd been too blind to understand. Had she known? Had she been trying to tell him? His phone buzzed again, another message from his mother. Also, I'm having the lawyers draw up papers for the Westbrook deal. We need to finalize it by Friday. This merger will make us the most powerful company on the East Coast. Power, money, success. 7 years ago, those words had meant everything. Now they felt hollow. James closed his eyes, but all he could see was that little girl's face, the way she'd smiled when she'd heard her mother's voice, the pure love in her eyes despite the rain, despite the dumpster, despite everything. Mommy will be so happy. Not, I'm hungry, or I'm tired, or I want to go home. Just happiness that she could help her mother. What kind of child thought like that at 6 years old? His child. Maybe. Probably. God, what had he done? The car pulled up to Mitchell Tower, 70 stories of glass and steel that bore his name, his kingdom, his empire, built on the ruins of the only real thing he'd ever had. Sir, Robert said quietly as James reached for the door, if that little girl is yours, what are you going to do? James froze, his hand on the handle. That was the question, wasn't it? What would he do? Claim her? Upend her life? Drag her and Rachel into his world of business deals and board meetings and sharks in expensive suits? Or worse? What if Rachel didn't want him anywhere near their daughter? What if she'd spent 7 years building a life without him, and he was just a painful memory she'd rather forget? I don't know, James whispered, but I have to find out the truth. He stepped out of the car and walked toward his building, past the doorman who called out a greeting he didn't hear, past the security desk where people jumped to attention, past the elevators full of employees who pressed themselves against the walls to give him space. Everyone always gave him space. He'd spent 7 years making sure of that. Now, all he wanted was to turn around, run back to that alley, and fall to his knees in the rain. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor. His assistant, Jennifer, rushed forward with his schedule. Mr. Mitchell, you have the board meeting in 20 minutes, then calls with Tokyo at 2, London at 4, and your mother has confirmed dinner at... Cancel it, James said, walking past her. I'm sorry, sir. Cancel what? Everything. Cancel everything. He walked into his office and closed the door, leaning against it as his legs finally gave out. He slid down to the floor, his expensive suit crumpling, and dropped his head into his hands. 7 years. 7 years of telling himself he'd made the right choice. 7 years of burying his feelings so deep he almost believed they were gone. 7 years of becoming exactly what his mother wanted him to be. And in 30 seconds, a little girl with green eyes had destroyed it all. His phone buzzed. A text from Robert. Found her. The girl's name is Emily Cooper, age 6, lives at the Riverside Apartments on 4th Street with her mother, Rachel Cooper. Sir, those apartments, they're condemned. The city's shutting them down next month. Rachel Cooper, her maiden name. She'd never taken his name when they were together. Said she'd only take a name when she was sure it was forever. And he'd proven her right. James typed back with shaking fingers. What about the father? Any records? The reply came fast. Birth certificate lists father as unknown. Unknown. He dropped the phone, covering his face with his hands as his breath came in short gasps. Rachel had raised their daughter alone for 6 years. In a condemned building, collecting cans to buy soup, while he'd built towers with his name on them. A knock on the door made him jump. Mr. Mitchell? Jennifer's voice was worried. "The board is waiting, and your mother just called. She said to remind you that tonight's dinner is important. She's bringing Victoria Westbrook. She says it's time you two got to know each other better." Victoria Westbrook, daughter of Westbrook Industries. Beautiful, educated, from the right family. Everything his mother had always wanted for him. Everything he'd thrown Rachel away to eventually have. "Tell them I'm sick," James said, his voice hoarse. "Sir? Tell them I'm sick, Jennifer. Tell the board to reschedule. Tell my mother. Tell her I can't make dinner. Tell her something came up." Silence. Then quietly, "Mr. Mitchell, are you okay? Should I call someone?" "No. Just give me some time." Her footsteps retreated. James pulled himself up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, in a condemned building 20 blocks away, Rachel was living a life he couldn't even imagine, struggling, fighting, raising a daughter who picked through trash with a smile because she wanted to make her mother happy. And he'd done that to them. He'd chosen his mother's approval over their future. He'd chosen money over love. He'd chosen wrong. But now he had a choice to make. Walk away again. Let them live their lives without him disrupting everything. Or fight. Fight for a daughter who didn't know he existed. Fight for a woman who probably hated him. Fight against his mother, his company, his entire world. James pressed his forehead against the cold glass. For 7 years he'd told himself he was strong because he'd walked away. Now he realized he'd just been a coward. His phone rang, his mother. He didn't answer. It rang again. The board chairman. He ignored it. Again. Victoria Westbrook. He turned it off. Because none of that mattered anymore. Nothing mattered except the little girl with green eyes who'd looked at him in the rain. His daughter, Emily. James turned from the window, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. He didn't know what he was going to do. Didn't know what he was going to say. Didn't even know if Rachel would let him in the door. But he had to try. He owed them that much. He owed them everything. The elevator doors opened. Jennifer stood there with wide eyes. "Sir, where are you?" "I don't know when I'll be back," James said, stepping past her. "Handle whatever comes up. Tell my mother. Tell her I'm dealing with something important." "But Mr. Mitchell, the Westbrook deal." "Can wait." He walked through the lobby, past staring employees, past his whole carefully constructed world, and stepped out into the rain. For 7 years, he'd been running toward success. Now it was time to run toward something that actually mattered. But as James climbed into his car and gave Robert the address, his phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Rachel. We need to talk. Today. It's about Emily, and it's urgent." James stared at the message, his heart stopping. She knew. Somehow Rachel knew he'd seen their daughter. And whatever she had to say, it was urgent. The car pulled into traffic, heading toward Riverside Apartments, toward Rachel, toward the truth, toward everything James had spent 7 years running from. And he had no idea what he was about to face. James read Rachel's text 3 more times as Robert drove through the city streets. Each time, his stomach twisted tighter. It's about Emily, and it's urgent. Urgent. That word echoed in his mind like a warning bell. Not, "we should talk," or "I need to see you." Urgent meant something was wrong, something serious. His fingers hovered over the phone screen. What should he say? After 7 years of silence, what words could possibly matter? Finally, he typed, "I'm on my way. Where should I meet you?" The reply came instantly. "The hospital, St. Mary's, 4th floor, room 412. Hospital. James felt the blood drain from his face. "Robert, change of plans. St. Mary's Hospital, as fast as you can." "Yes, sir." The car jerked left, cutting through traffic. James stared at his phone, his mind racing through terrible possibilities. Was Emily sick? Hurt? How bad was it? And why now? Why today had Rachel decided to reach out after all these years? Unless she'd seen him too. Seen him standing there in the rain staring at their daughter. Maybe Emily had mentioned the man in the fancy car who'd looked at her strangely. The 20-minute drive felt like hours. James watched the buildings blur past, his knee bouncing with nervous energy. He'd faced hostile takeovers, board rebellions, billion-dollar deals that could make or break his company. None of that compared to the fear flooding through him now. St. Mary's Hospital finally appeared ahead, its white walls rising against the gray sky. Robert pulled up to the entrance. "Should I wait, sir?" "Yes, no, I don't know." James ran his hand through his damp hair. "Just stay close. I might need you." He climbed out and walked through the automatic doors into the antiseptic smell of the hospital. The receptionist looked up with a practiced smile that faded when she saw his face. "4th floor," James said. "Room 412. Elevators are—" But James was already moving, following the signs, his expensive shoes squeaking on the polished floor. A few people turned to stare at the wet, disheveled man in a designer suit who looked like his world was ending. They weren't wrong. The elevator climbed slowly. 2nd floor, 3rd floor. James caught his reflection in the metal doors. He looked terrible. Hair messy, tie loose, eyes wild. Nothing like the controlled, powerful CEO who'd walked into his office that morning. That version of James Mitchell felt like a stranger now. 4th floor. The doors opened. James stepped out into a hallway painted in cheerful yellows and blues, with cartoon animals on the walls. The pediatric ward. His heart sank further. Room 412 was at the end of the hall. The door was half open. James stood outside it, his hand raised to knock, paralyzed. Through the gap, he could hear voices. A woman's voice, tired and strained. Rachel's voice, though it sounded different than he remembered. Older. Worn down by years he knew nothing about. "The doctor said we need to make a decision soon, sweetie. But I want you to know that whatever happens, Mommy's going to figure it out. I always do, right?" "I know, Mommy." That small voice, the same one that had said, "Mommy will be so happy in the rain." "I'm not scared. But Mommy, you look scared." "I'm not scared, baby. I'm just tired." "Because of the extra shifts at the diner?" "Don't you worry about that." James felt something break inside his chest. Extra shifts at a diner. While he'd eaten at restaurants where a single meal cost more than most people made in a week. He knocked softly. The conversation stopped. Footsteps approached. The door opened wider. And there she was. Rachel. 7 years had changed her. The bright, laughing girl he'd fallen in love with was gone. In her place stood a woman who looked a decade older than her 29 years. Her brown hair, once long and shiny, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her clothes were clean but worn, the kind you got from thrift stores and stretched until they fell apart. But her eyes, those warm brown eyes that had once looked at him like he was her whole world. Now they looked at him with something far more complicated. Anger, sadness, and underneath it all, desperate hope. "James," she whispered. "Rachel, His voice cracked. "I got your text. What's wrong? Is Emily—" Rachel glanced back into the room, then stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. "How did you know her name?" "I saw her. Today. Behind my building. She was—" He couldn't finish. Couldn't say the words picking through trash out loud. Rachel's face flushed red, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "We do what we have to do." "I wasn't judging, I just—" "Rachel, what's going on? Why are we at a hospital?" She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were wet with tears she refused to let fall. "Emily needs surgery. Her appendix. It burst 3 hours ago. They got it out." But there were complications. Infection spread. She needs antibiotics, monitoring, maybe another surgery if things get worse. James felt the floor tilt under his feet. Is she going to be okay? The doctors say yes. Probably. If. Rachel's voice broke. If we can afford to keep her here long enough, if we can pay for the medication she needs, if a dozen other things go right. How much? What? How much does she need? James pulled out his phone. I'll transfer it right now. Whatever the hospital wants, whatever she needs. Rachel laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. Of course. That's your answer to everything, isn't it? Money. Just throw money at the problem and make it go away. That's not what $43,000, Rachel said flatly. That's what they estimate the total cost will be. I have $1,700 in my savings account. The hospital says they'll work with me on a payment plan, but James, even with that, I can't. I work double shifts at the diner and still barely make rent. I pick up side jobs. Emily and I collect cans on weekends. I've sold everything I own that has any value. And it's still not enough. She wiped angrily at her eyes. So yes, I texted you. Because I saw you today through the diner window standing in the rain, watching Emily like your heart was breaking. And I realized you knew. Somehow you figured it out. And I hate myself for this. But my daughter's life is worth more than my pride. James felt like he'd been punched. Rachel, of course I'll pay for everything. I'll call the hospital administrator right now. They'll have whatever they need within the hour, and not a payment plan. Full payment. Done. Just like that. Just like that. Rachel stared at him for a long moment. And what do you want in return? Nothing. I want nothing except for Emily to be okay. I don't believe you. Rachel's voice was hard now. 7 years, James. 7 years of nothing. Not a call, not a text, not a single question about whether I was okay. And now you show up and want to play hero? Why? Guilty conscience finally catch up with you? Yes, James said simply. Yes, it did. Rachel, I'm so sorry for everything, for leaving, for not fighting for us, for being too weak to stand up to my mother, for all of it. Your mother. Rachel laughed that bitter laugh again. Of course! Is she still pulling your strings? Still deciding who's good enough for the great James Mitchell? She doesn't know I'm here. Nobody does. How convenient. Secret charity from the Billionaire. Very noble. Stop. James stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I destroyed what we had. But that little girl in there is my daughter, isn't she? Rachel went very still. What makes you think that? She has my eyes, Rachel. My dimple. The way she moves. The way she concentrates. I saw it the moment I looked at her. But more than that. He swallowed hard. More than that, I remember. That last night. You touched your stomach. You had this look on your face. Were you trying to tell me? Tears spilled down Rachel's cheeks now. I didn't know for sure yet. I suspected. I was going to take a test the next day. But then you came home with your bags packed and your mother's words in your mouth about how I wasn't appropriate and how you needed to focus on your future. So I never told you. I took the test alone, went to the doctor alone, threw up every morning alone, gave birth alone, raised her alone. Her voice rose with each word until she was almost shouting. A nurse looked over with concern, but Rachel waved her away. You want to know the worst part? Rachel continued, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. Emily asks about you all the time. Where's my daddy? Why doesn't he want to meet me? Did I do something wrong? And I have to lie to her. I tell her that her daddy lives far away, that it's complicated, that it has nothing to do with her. Because how do I tell a 6-year-old that her father chose money over us? James felt tears on his own face now. You're right. About all of it. I was a coward. I let my mother convince me that success was more important than love. I built an empire and lost everything that mattered. But Rachel, please, let me fix this. Let me help. You can't fix 7 years with a check, James. I know, but I can start by making sure our daughter gets better, and then... He took a shaky breath. Then maybe you'll let me try to be what I should have been all along. If not for you, then for Emily. Rachel studied his face, searching for something. Finally, she said, "She doesn't know who you are." I know. And I won't tell her. Not yet. Not until I'm sure you're going to stick around. I won't let you break her heart the way you broke mine. Fair enough. The money? I'll pay you back, every cent. It might take me 20 years, but I'll... No. James's voice was firm. This isn't a loan. This is me taking care of my daughter, our daughter. You don't owe me anything, Rachel. If anything, I owe you 7 years of child support and a lifetime of apologies. Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked exhausted, defeated, like she'd been fighting for so long that she didn't know how to stop. Can I see her? James asked quietly. Just for a minute? You can introduce me as a friend. Or don't introduce me at all. I just need to see that she's okay. Rachel hesitated, then nodded slowly. 1 minute. And James, don't make promises you won't keep. Not to her. She's been through enough. She opened the door wider. James stepped into the room and felt his heart stop for the second time that day. Emily lay in the hospital bed, looking impossibly small against the white sheets. An IV line ran into her arm. Monitors beeped softly. Her face was pale, but her eyes, those green eyes that matched his, were open and alert. When she saw him, she tilted her head curiously. "Mommy, who's that?" "This is a friend of Mommy's," Rachel said carefully. "His name is James." "Hi, James." Emily's voice was weak but cheerful. "Did you come to visit me? I'm sick, but the doctors say I'm going to be okay. They gave me medicine that tastes like cherries." James couldn't speak, couldn't move. This brave, beautiful child who'd been digging through dumpsters just hours ago was lying in a hospital bed talking about cherry-flavored medicine like it was an adventure. "Hi, Emily," he finally managed. "I heard you weren't feeling well. I wanted to make sure you're okay." "I'm tough," Emily said proudly. "Mommy says I'm the toughest girl she knows. When I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor so I can help sick kids feel better." That's a wonderful dream." "What do you do, James?" He glanced at Rachel, who watched him with guarded eyes. I work with buildings, helping people build things." "That's cool. Maybe you can build a hospital. A really big one where all the sick kids can come and no one has to worry about..." She trailed off, looking at her mother with concern that no 6-year-old should have to feel. "About what?" "Sweetie," Rachel asked gently. "About money," Emily whispered. "I heard you talking to the nurse about how we don't have enough money. But it's okay, Mommy. When I get better, I'll collect more cans. I'll work really hard." Rachel made a sound like a sob, but she caught it and turned it into a cough. James felt his chest crack wide open. "You don't need to worry about that anymore," James said before he could stop himself. "Your mom and we're going to take care of everything. You just focus on getting better." "Really?" Emily's face lit up with hope so pure it hurt to look at. "Mommy, did you hear that? James is going to help us." Rachel shot James a warning look, but she nodded. "Yes, baby. He's going to help." "Thank you, James." Emily reached out her small hand. James took it carefully, afraid he might break her. Her hand was so tiny in his, so fragile, but her grip was strong. "You have pretty eyes," Emily said. "They're like mine, green like emeralds. That's what Mommy says. She says my eyes are special." "They are special," James whispered, his voice breaking. Very special. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry, but we need to check Emily's vitals and change her IV. Family only for the next hour." Rachel looked at James. "You should go." He nodded, gently releasing Emily's hand. "I'll be back," he said to Emily, "if that's okay with your mom." "Of course it's okay," Emily said. "You're Mommy's friend. Friends visit when you're sick. That's what friends do." Friends, if only she knew. James walked to the door, then paused. "Rachel, I'll call the hospital administrator before I leave the building, and He lowered his voice. "I'll be in touch. About everything." Rachel just nodded, her expression unreadable. James left the room and made it halfway down the hall before his legs gave out. He sat down hard on a bench outside the elevator, his head in his hands. His daughter, his brave, beautiful, sick daughter who collected cans and dreamed of being a doctor and thought her green eyes were special. His daughter who didn't know he was her father. His daughter who'd almost died today while he'd been preparing for board meetings and dinner parties. James pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed the hospital administrator. "This is James Mitchell. I'm calling about a patient on your 4th floor, Emily Cooper, room 412. Whatever bills she has, whatever she will have, I'm paying for all of it. Full payment. Today." As he spoke, authorizing transfers and signing digital forms, James made himself a promise. He'd failed Rachel and Emily once. He wouldn't fail them again. But as he sat there in that hospital hallway, his phone buzzing with ignored calls from his mother and his assistant, and his entire other life, James realized something terrifying. He had no idea how to be a father. He had no idea if Rachel would ever forgive him. And he had no idea how to fix 7 years of mistakes. All he knew was that he had to try. The elevator doors opened. James stood, straightened his tie, and prepared to walk back into his old world. But everything had changed, and there was no going back. His phone buzzed one more time, a text from his mother. "James, where are you? Victoria Westbrook is at the restaurant waiting. This deal is worth $500 million. You're embarrassing me. Call me immediately." $500 million. James looked back toward room 412, where his daughter lay fighting an infection while his ex-girlfriend worked double shifts at a diner. He typed back, "The deal is off, all of it. I'll explain later." Then he turned off his phone. Because some things were worth more than $500 million, some things were worth everything. 3 days later, James sat in his car outside the Riverside Apartments, watching Rachel climb the rusty stairs to the 3rd floor. She carried 2 plastic grocery bags in each hand, her shoulders hunched against the evening wind. He'd watched her make this same trip 6 times now, always after her shift at the diner, always looking exhausted. He'd been following her routine since Emily got out of the hospital yesterday. Not in a creepy way, he told himself, just making sure they were okay. Making sure Rachel didn't need anything. Making sure he didn't lose sight of them again. His phone buzzed for the 100th time that day. His mother. Again. He'd been avoiding her calls since the hospital, but she was getting desperate. Her last voicemail had been almost frantic. "James, what is going on? You cancel the Westbrook deal without explanation? You miss 3 board meetings? Your assistant says you've been unavailable for days? People are asking questions? Are you having some kind of breakdown? Call me back. Now." A breakdown. Maybe that's what this was. The careful, controlled world he'd built was crumbling, and he was letting it happen. No, not letting it. Helping it fall. His real phone, the one only Robert and Jennifer knew about, buzzed with a different message. Jennifer. "Sir, the board called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. They're threatening a vote of no confidence if you don't attend. Your mother is leading the charge." Of course she was. James typed back, "Let them vote. I'll be there." He looked back up at Rachel's window. A light flickered on. Through the thin curtains, he could see her moving around, probably putting away groceries. He wondered what Emily was doing. Homework? Playing? Resting after her surgery? A knock on his car window made him jump. Robert stood there, holding an umbrella against the light drizzle that had started. James rolled down the window. "Sir, you asked me to let you know when I found out more about the building." "And?" Robert's face was grim. "It's worse than we thought. The city condemned it 2 months ago. Structural damage, faulty wiring, mold in the walls. They're forcing everyone out by the end of this month. That's 3 weeks away." James felt his stomach drop. "Where will they go?" "The city's offering vouchers for temporary housing, but most of the families here can't afford anything better even with help. Ms. Cooper..." Robert paused. "Sir, she's been looking at shelters. I saw her at St. Francis yesterday, asking about their family program." Shelters. His daughter in a shelter. "No," James said firmly. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts. "Get me Lisa Chen, the real estate agent. Tell her I need a list of available apartments by morning. Safe neighborhoods, near good schools, move-in ready." "Sir, if I may..." Robert hesitated. "Ms. Cooper seems like a proud woman. She might not accept..." "I know." James rubbed his face tiredly. "But I have to try." He climbed out of the car, straightening his jacket. He'd dressed down today, jeans and a simple shirt, trying not to look like the billionaire he was. But even his casual clothes probably cost more than Rachel made in a month. "Wish me luck," he muttered to Robert, then headed toward the building. The stairs creaked under his weight. The hallway on the 3rd floor smelled like mildew and old cooking grease. Apartment 3C had a crooked number and chipped paint on the door. James raised his hand to knock, then stopped. What was he doing? Rachel had made it clear she didn't want his charity. She'd barely spoken to him at the hospital after that first day. Just nodded politely when he visited Emily and quickly found excuses to leave the room. But Emily had been so happy to see him each time. She'd asked him about buildings, about his favorite color, about whether he liked chocolate or vanilla ice cream. Simple questions that made his heart ache because he'd missed 6 years of answering them. Before he could talk himself out of it, James knocked. Footsteps. The door opened a crack, the chain still attached. Rachel's face appeared, her eyes widening when she saw him. "James? What are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Please. How did you even know where I live?" He had the grace to look guilty. I found out. Rachel, please. 5 minutes." She stared at him for a long moment, then sighed, and closed the door to unhook the chain. When it opened again, she stood back reluctantly. 5 minutes. Emily's doing homework in her room. James stepped inside and tried not to let his shock show on his face. The apartment was tiny, maybe 400 square feet total. The living room and kitchen were basically one space, with a counter separating them. A small hallway led to what he assumed were the bedroom and bathroom. The furniture was old and mismatched, but everything was spotlessly clean. Drawings covered the walls, Emily's artwork displayed with the same pride someone might show for expensive paintings. "Nice place," James said, and immediately regretted it when Rachel's eyes flashed with anger. Don't you dare come into my home and lie to me. It's a dump and we both know it. But it's what I can afford and I keep it clean. And Emily is happy here." "I wasn't being sarcastic. I meant the way you've made it a home. The drawings. He gestured helplessly. "I'm sorry. I'm saying this all wrong." Rachel crossed her arms. "Your 5 minutes are ticking. The building is being condemned. End of the month. You have 3 weeks to find somewhere else to live." Her face went pale, then red. "How do you... You've been checking up on me? Rachel, you've been spying on me? On us? No, I mean, yes, but not like that. I just wanted to make sure you were okay, that Emily was recovering properly, and I found out about the building and I wanted to help. Help! Rachel laughed bitterly. There's that word again. Let me guess. You want to throw more money at the problem? Buy us a nice apartment somewhere? Maybe set up a trust fund? Would that be so terrible? Yes, Rachel's voice rose. Yes, it would be. Because where were you when I was sleeping in my car during my 3rd trimester because I couldn't afford rent and utilities? Where were you when I gave birth alone because I had no one to call? Where were you when Emily was 2 and got pneumonia and I had to choose between her medicine and keeping the lights on? Her hands were shaking now, years of held-back anger pouring out. You don't get to show up 7 years later and play savior, James. You don't get to ease your guilt by fixing things with your credit card. We survived without you. We'll keep surviving. I know I can't fix the past, James said quietly. But Rachel, Emily is my daughter, our daughter, and she's about to be homeless. Let me help. Not for you if you hate me that much, but for her. I don't hate you. Rachel's voice cracked. I wish I did. It would be so much easier if I did, but I don't. I can't let myself depend on you again. I can't let Emily depend on you. Because what happens when you decide this isn't what you want anymore? When your mother convinces you we're not worth the trouble? When some board meeting or business deal becomes more important? That won't happen. You don't know that. You couldn't stand up to your mother 7 years ago. What makes you think you can now? Before James could answer, a small voice came from the hallway. Mommy, is someone here? They both turned. Emily stood in the doorway of her bedroom, wearing pajamas covered in stars. Her face lit up when she saw James. James! You came to visit. Mommy, can James stay for dinner? Please? Rachel's expression softened as she looked at her daughter. Baby, I don't think... Please? We made spaghetti. Well, we made pasta, and we have sauce from a jar, but it's really good. And James is your friend, so he should stay. Friends eat dinner together. James saw the war happening on Rachel's face, the desire to protect Emily from potential hurt, battling against the joy in their daughter's eyes. It's okay, James started to say. I should probably... He can stay, Rachel said quietly. For dinner. But that's all. Emily squealed with happiness and ran over to grab James's hand. Come on, I'll show you my room first. I drew a picture of a hospital today. I'm going to be a doctor, remember? So I practiced drawing medical stuff. She dragged him down the short hallway before he could respond. Her room was barely bigger than a closet, with a twin bed pushed against one wall and a small desk under the window. But like the rest of the apartment, it was filled with love. Drawings covered every surface. A shelf held carefully arranged toys, most of them old but well-maintained. And on the desk, a photo of Rachel and Emily, both smiling at the camera. No father in sight, because he'd been too much of a coward to be there. This is my hospital, Emily said proudly, pointing to a drawing on her desk. It showed a building with a red cross and stick figures of children. When I'm a doctor, I'm going to make sure no kids have to worry about money when they're sick. Everyone should get help when they're hurt, right? James felt tears prick his eyes. Right. That's exactly right. Are you crying? Emily peered up at him with concern. Are you sad? No, sweetie. You're a very special girl. Your mom must be so proud of you. She says that all the time, Emily beamed. She says I'm her sunshine. Even when things are hard, I make her happy. Do you have a sunshine, James? He looked down at this little girl with his eyes and Rachel's heart, and something inside him that had been frozen for 7 years finally thawed. I think I just found her, he whispered. Dinner's ready, Rachel called from the kitchen, her voice tight. They walked back out. Rachel had set the small table for 3, though her movements were stiff, like she regretted the invitation. The pasta was simple, just noodles and jarred sauce, but Emily chattered happily about her day at school while they ate. And then Tommy said his dad is a firefighter, and Melissa said her dad is a teacher, and I said my dad... She paused, her smile fading a little. I said I don't have a dad. But that's okay because Mommy is both. The fork froze halfway to James's mouth. Rachel stared at her plate, her jaw tight. Emily, James said carefully. Everyone has a dad, even if he's not around. I know. Mommy says mine lives far away. Is that true, Mommy? Rachel looked up, her eyes meeting James's across the table. The pain in them was unbearable. Yes, baby. That's true. Do you think he ever thinks about me? The question hung in the air like a blade. James set down his fork, his appetite gone. Every day, he said, his voice rough. I bet he thinks about you every single day. Emily considered this, then nodded. Okay, that makes me feel better. She went back to eating, oblivious to the tension between the adults. After dinner, Rachel sent Emily to brush her teeth and get ready for bed. When she was out of the room, Rachel turned to James. You need to leave. Rachel, please, this was a mistake. Seeing you, having you here, it's confusing. For me and for Emily. You can't just drop into our lives like this. I'm not dropping in. I want to be here. I want to know my daughter. And then what? You get bored? You realize being a father is hard work? You decide we don't fit into your perfect billionaire life? That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. Rachel's voice broke. You got to walk away 7 years ago. You got to build your empire and your reputation. I got stretch marks and sleepless nights and judgmental looks from people who thought I was just another single mom who couldn't keep a man. I got to explain to a 4-year-old why she didn't have a daddy when all her friends did. I got to work 3 jobs while pregnant because I had no one else. So don't talk to me about fair. James stood, his own emotions finally boiling over. You're right. None of it is fair. I was a coward and an idiot, and I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too weak to fight for it. But I'm here now, Rachel. I'm trying. And I'm not going anywhere. You say that now. I mean it. Mommy? Emily's voice came from the hallway, small and worried. Why are you and James yelling? They both froze. Rachel took a deep breath and forced a smile. We're not yelling, baby. Just having a grown-up conversation. Are you ready for bed? Will James read me a story? The request caught them both off guard. Rachel started to say no, but Emily's hopeful face stopped her. Please, Mommy. He has a nice voice. I bet he's good at stories. Rachel looked at James, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded. One story, then bed. Emily grabbed James's hand and pulled him back to her room. She climbed into bed and handed him a worn book about a brave little girl who wanted to be a doctor. This is my favorite, she said. Mommy reads it to me all the time. James opened the book, his hands shaking slightly. As he read, Emily snuggled into her pillows, her eyes growing heavy. When he finished, she was almost asleep. James, she murmured. Yes? I'm glad you're Mommy's friend. She needs more friends. She's always working or taking care of me. She doesn't have time for fun. Your mom is amazing. I know. Emily yawned. Maybe you can help her have fun sometimes. That would be nice. She drifted off before he could respond. James sat there for a moment, watching his daughter sleep, memorizing every detail of her face. When he came back out, Rachel was washing dishes at the sink, her back to him. She's asleep, James said softly. Rachel nodded but didn't turn around. Thank you for reading to her. Rachel, I know you don't believe me, but I'm not going anywhere. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I'm going to prove to you that I've changed. She finally turned, tears streaming down her face. What if you prove it, and I still can't forgive you? What if I can't forget the past 7 years? Then I'll live with that. But at least let me be there for Emily. She deserves a father, even if you can't stand to look at me." "I can look at you," Rachel whispered. "That's the problem. I look at you and I remember how much I loved you, how much I believed in us, and it hurts just as much now as it did then." James took a step toward her, then stopped. "I loved you too. I never stopped." "Don't. Please don't say things like that." "Why not? It's true." "Because it makes everything harder." Rachel wiped her eyes angrily. "You need to go. We both need space to think." James nodded slowly. He walked to the door, then paused. "The building. End of the month. Please let me help you find somewhere safe. Not for me. For Emily." "I'll think about it." It wasn't yes, but it wasn't no. James took what he could get. As he walked down the stairs and back to his car, his phone buzzed. His mother, again. The message was short and cutting. "Board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Be there or lose everything you've worked for. Your choice." James looked back up at the window where Rachel and Emily lived in their tiny, soon-to-be-condemned apartment. Then he looked at his phone and the life it represented. 7 years ago, he'd made the wrong choice. Tomorrow, he'd make a different one. Even if it cost him everything. James walked into the Mitchell Industries boardroom at exactly 9 a.m., wearing the same jeans and shirt from the night before. He hadn't gone home, hadn't slept, had spent the whole night in his car outside Rachel's building, thinking about everything he was about to do. The board members stared at him like he'd grown a second head. His mother, positioned at the head of the table in what should have been his seat, looked like she might have a stroke. "James," she said coldly, "how kind of you to finally join us, though I see you couldn't be bothered to dress appropriately." "We need to talk," James said, ignoring the others, "all of you, about the future of this company." His mother's smile was sharp as a knife. "Indeed we do. Perhaps you'd like to explain where you've been for the past week? Or why you canceled a $500 million deal without consulting anyone? Or why you've been completely unreachable?" "I've been with my daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. His mother's face went from red to white to red again. "Your what?" "My daughter, Emily. She's 6 years old. She almost died last week from a burst appendix. And I didn't even know she existed until I saw her picking through a dumpster behind this building to help her mother buy food." Someone gasped. James couldn't tell who. He kept his eyes on his mother. "You remember Rachel Cooper, don't you, Mother? The woman you said wasn't good enough for me? The one you convinced me to leave because she didn't come from the right family? Well, she was pregnant when I left her, and I was too much of a coward to question your judgment. So I walked away from the best thing that ever happened to me." "James, this is hardly the time or place," his mother started. "No, this is exactly the time and place," James cut her off. "Because for 7 years I've let you run my life. I've let you decide who I should date, who I should marry, which deals to take, how to run this company. I've been your puppet, and I'm done." "You're being hysterical," his mother said, but James heard the edge of panic in her voice. "Whatever fantasy this woman has sold you, Emily has my eyes, my dimple. She looks exactly like the pictures of me at that age. She's mine, Mother. And while I was building this empire you wanted so badly, she was living in a condemned building and collecting cans for spare change." James turned to address the full board. "I'm stepping down as CEO." Chaos erupted. People shouting, his mother's voice rising above them all, demanding explanations. But James just stood there, calm for the first time in years. When the noise died down, he continued, "I'll stay on the board as a voting member, but I'm done with the day-to-day operations. I'm done with 18-hour work days and missing what matters. I'm done building towers when I should be building a relationship with my daughter." "You can't do this," his mother hissed. "You'll destroy everything your father built." "No, Mother. Dad built a company. You built an empire. But neither of you built a family. And I'm not making that mistake twice. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. I've already spoken with the lawyers. Jennifer will take over as interim CEO. She's been running most operations anyway. And she'll do a better job than I ever did because she actually cares about this company instead of just the profit margins. This is insane, one of the board members sputtered. You're throwing away billions. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm keeping my shares. I'm keeping my seat on the board. I'm just choosing to be a father instead of a robot. James looked around the table. How many of you have kids you barely know? Families you only see on holidays? How many of you are building fortunes to leave to children who won't remember you? The silence was answer enough. I'm done with that life, James said quietly. You can vote me out if you want. Take away my title. I don't care anymore, because I finally understand what my father never did. You can't take money with you when you die, but you can leave behind people who loved you. And for 7 years, I've been on the wrong side of that equation. His mother stood, her hands flat on the table. If you walk out of this boardroom, you're no longer my son. James felt the words like a physical blow, but he also felt something else. Relief. Then I guess I'm not your son, he said, because I walked out on my daughter once. I won't do it again. He turned and headed for the door. James. His mother's voice was desperate now. Think about what you're doing. That woman, she's just after your money. James paused, his hand on the doorknob. Rachel has spent the last week avoiding me. She won't take my calls. She barely let me in her apartment. Last night she cried because seeing me hurts too much. If she wanted my money, Mother, she could have come to me 7 years ago. She could have demanded child support, dragged me to court, made my life hell. Instead, she raised our daughter alone in poverty because she has more pride and dignity than you'll ever understand. He opened the door, then looked back one last time. I'm sorry, Mother. I'm sorry I'm not the son you wanted, but I'm trying to be the father Emily deserves, and that's more important to me than any amount of money. James walked out of the boardroom, through the office he'd spent 7 years building, past the assistants and executives who stared at him with shock and confusion. He didn't stop until he was in the elevator, alone, heading down. His phone buzzed. Jennifer. Sir, did you really just do what I think you did? James typed back. Yes, and the position is yours if you want it. You'll be amazing. What about you? I'm going to be a dad. Wish me luck. The elevator opened on the ground floor. James walked through the lobby out into the morning sunlight and felt lighter than he had in years. His phone kept buzzing, board members, lawyers, business associates, but he ignored them all. He had somewhere more important to be. 20 minutes later, James stood outside Pete's diner, watching through the window as Rachel balanced 3 plates on her arms, delivering breakfast to a table of construction workers. She was smiling, making small talk, refilling coffee. She looked exhausted but beautiful. James walked inside. The little bell over the door chimed. Rachel looked up, saw him, and nearly dropped the coffee pot. James, what are you? I quit, he said simply. Rachel stared at him. The whole diner had gone quiet, everyone watching. You what? I quit. Well, technically, I stepped down as CEO, but same difference. I told my mother off in front of the entire board. I'm pretty sure she disowned me, and I came here because... He took a deep breath. Because I realized something. For 7 years, I chose wrong. Every single time I had a choice between what mattered and what looked good, I chose wrong, but not anymore. James, you can't just quit your job because... I didn't quit because of you. I quit because of me. Because I looked at my life and realized I didn't like the person I'd become. Because I want to be someone Emily can be proud of, not just some distant figure who sends money. Rachel set down the coffee pot with shaking hands. This is crazy. Probably. But I'm done being sane if sane means being miserable. James stepped closer. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm just asking for a chance to know my daughter, to be there for her, to maybe, eventually, prove to you that I'm not the same coward who walked away 7 years ago. You really told your mother off? Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. I really did. It was terrifying and liberating and probably stupid, but it felt right. And your company? We'll be fine without me. Better, probably. James smiled slightly. Turns out I was never that good at the CEO thing anyway. I was just good at pretending. Rachel looked at him for a long moment. Around them, the diner was dead silent, everyone watching this drama unfold like a soap opera. I have 2 more hours on my shift, Rachel finally said. I'll wait. James, I'll wait, he repeated firmly. I've got nothing but time now, and I owe you 7 years of waiting, so 2 hours is nothing. Rachel bit her lip, and James saw the war happening behind her eyes. Fear, hope, anger, longing, all of it tangled together. There's a booth in the corner, she said quietly. Order something. On the house. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. James sat in that booth for 2 hours, nursing coffee and pie he barely tasted. He watched Rachel work, the way she moved through the diner with practiced efficiency, the way she smiled at customers even when they were rude, the way she paused every so often to rub her lower back. She was so strong, stronger than he'd ever been. When her shift ended, Rachel untied her apron and grabbed her purse. She walked over to James's booth and stood there, uncertainty written all over her face. Emily gets out of school in an hour, she said. There's a park nearby where I pick her up. She likes to play on the swings before we go home. Can I come? Rachel hesitated, then nodded. But James, you need to understand something. Emily doesn't know who you are, and I'm not ready to tell her yet. Not until I'm sure. Sure of what? That you're going to stay. That you mean what you say. That you won't break her heart. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. She's already asked me twice this week when you're coming to visit again. She thinks you're wonderful, and I'm terrified because I remember thinking you were wonderful too. And look how that ended. James stood, resisting the urge to reach for her. I know I can't prove it with words, so let me prove it with actions. Let me show up, every day, for as long as it takes. Let me be there for Emily's school events and doctor's appointments and just normal, boring life. Let me earn your trust back. And if you can't, if I can't forgive you, then at least Emily will have a father who tries. That's more than I gave her before. Rachel wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. Okay, you can come to the park, but as my friend James, just a friend. Can you do that? I can do that. They walked to the park together, not touching, careful to maintain distance. But as they walked, Rachel started talking. About Emily's favorite foods, her best friend at school, the way she sang made-up songs in the bathtub. 7 years of memories James had missed, all pouring out in the 20-minute walk. And James listened to every word, storing them away like precious gems. When they reached the school, children were streaming out of the building. Emily appeared, her backpack almost as big as she was, her face lighting up when she saw them. Mommy and James, you're both here. She ran over and grabbed both their hands. Can we all go to the park together, please? Rachel looked at James over Emily's head. In her eyes, he saw fear and hope warring for dominance. Yes, baby, Rachel said softly. We can all go together. Emily skipped between them toward the park, chattering about her day at school. And as they walked, Emily swinging their hands, James felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years. Peace. It would take time. He knew that. Rachel's trust wasn't something he could buy or demand. He'd have to earn it back, day by day, moment by moment. But as he watched Emily run toward the swings, her laughter carrying on the breeze, James knew he'd made the right choice. Some things were worth more than empires. Some things were worth everything. And maybe, just maybe, if he was patient enough, if he proved himself enough, he'd get a second chance at the family he'd thrown away. Rachel sat on a bench watching Emily play. James sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For this. For giving me a chance." Rachel didn't look at him. "Don't thank me yet. We have a long way to go." "I know." "And James?" She finally turned to face him. "If you hurt her, if you disappoint her, if you decide this is too hard and walk away again, I will never forgive you. Never. I won't, I promise." Everyone promises, until they don't. Before James could respond, Emily called out from the swings. "James, push me! Push me higher!" He looked at Rachel, asking permission. She nodded. James walked over to his daughter and gently pushed the swing, sending her soaring. Her laughter filled the air, pure and joyful and perfect. And in that moment, watching his daughter fly against the sunset sky, James Mitchell finally understood what it meant to be rich. It had nothing to do with money. The end.